There's a sign posted on some God-fearing farmer's land along I-65 that I saw every time I drove back to Indiana. It read, "Hell is real." And I always thought, I know. I live here too. My time in Indiana was filled with the thought, I don't belong here. After 5 years of living in the Hoosier state, I feel as disconnected from it now as I did when my girlfriend and I first moved. Something about it always felt temporary. Like, even the state slogan is the crossroads of America, which is just a nice way of saying no one wants to stay here longer than they need to. And I relate to that because I didn't spend 1 second longer there than I needed to. It's hard to properly describe why I hate Indiana. Everything I say will seem petty and exaggerated, which, in fairness, it is. And most of it has more to do with who I am than anything else. But here are my grievances. First off, the state is flatter than it has any business being. Wherever you are, it feels like you can see miles and miles of cornfields, or soybean fields, depending on the crop rotation. Meaning, from an aesthetic standpoint, it's pretty much saying, hello, I'm boring. Also, people everywhere like to focus on how messed up the weather is, and despite having relatively normal weather, the people of Indiana are no exception. It will snow 2 inches, and everyone in the state will lose their collective minds. The best thing is that a week later, it will be mildly warm, and you will hear at least 4,000 people make the same comment that the weather really just needs to make up its mind. The real issue isn't the weather, it's that the state never learned how to deal with the various types of weather it gets. So when it rains, everything floods, and when it snows more than a dusting, approximately 90% of drivers just forget how to drive. Despite getting it every year, Indiana does not know how to deal with snow. And I think it's because the state views itself as the South, but it forgets it's north of the Mason-Dixon line. People think Indiana is part of the Midwest, but culturally it's not. It's really its own thing. Indiana is like a little brother who wants to be just like his older brother, in this case, the South. So in an effort to emulate his brother, he put sweet tea and Confederate flags all around his room. However, the South never really gave him the acceptance he so desperately needed, leading Indiana to fall back on his very kind older sister, the Midwest, who accepted him for who he was. But she was too bashful to point out that all the Confederate flags were in poor taste and that the sweet tea would likely give him diabetes, so he ended up keeping those things around. Indiana takes a lot of pride in its ruralness, which is not inherently a bad thing. However, the country lifestyle is really not for me. Now, maybe the worst thing about Indiana is that the majority of it is in Eastern time. It's pressed up against the western side of that time zone, which means during the winter, if you work a day job, you will probably never see the sun, and in summer, it stays light out pretty much all night. Look, Eastern time sucks. If you're watching any live event, it goes way too late. If you have friends living on the West Coast, just learn to never speak with them again because your schedules won't line up. All of these things together make Indiana's identity an amalgamation of the regions surrounding it, creating a Frankenstein's monster of culture that I still do not understand. And although I never felt like I truly fit in, for the past 5 years, Indiana has been my home. It's where my girlfriend and I first started living together. And we went from being two people who loved each other to being partners in every sense of the word. It's where I eventually proposed to her, and she made a massive mistake by saying yes. It's where I worked my first real adult-type job, taking on more responsibilities than I ever had before, and feeling like an imposter the entire time. It's where I put down new roots, even if they never went that deep. Finding people I liked, restaurants I deemed tolerable, and various places to go to distract from the fact that I lived in a cornfield. I got comfortable there, and there's something to be said for that. I learned about the city I lived in and the ones around it. I explored places enough for them to become familiar. I met a lot of new people, and while the values, interests, and hobbies of most of them ended up being far different than mine, their mixture of Midwestern niceness and Southern politeness made me feel welcome. And as a long-time Midwesterner, their ability to make meaningful conversations about anything, even the fucking weather, is something I can appreciate. Indiana was the world I spent every day navigating. If you wanted to get to Walmart, I could annoyingly give you directions to it, even though we both know it'd be much easier for you to just look it up on your phone. Walking out of the places that I frequented over the past 5 years, knowing that I will most likely never set foot in them again, gave me the strange sensation that I was forgetting something inside of them, that I left something behind, that I would need to go back. But I don't. And in all honesty, I probably won't. Home is a weird thing, and I think it has more to do with the people you're around than the place you are in. Indiana is where my fiance and I started our first home together, and a part of me is always going to be in those places I left behind. Despite being beyond excited to be moving somewhere that is more me, I will always owe Indiana for that. So, thank you, Indiana. I still hate you though. Sincerely, Raz. P.S. Indianapolis, I know you're watching this. This is not about you. You're cool. Have a good one. Peace.